Eva Hart was just 7 years old when she boarded the RMS Titanic with her parents in April 1912. Yet her memory of that night remained vivid and influenced her for the rest of her life. Her father had decided to emigrate to Canada, where opportunities seemed more promising. They booked passage for the family on the Titanic's maiden voyage, traveling as second-class passengers. From the very beginning, Eva's mother had a sense of dread about the voyage. She distrusted the ship's boast of being unsinkable and believed that tempting fate in such a way was dangerous. Her mother was so convinced something was going to happen that she refused to sleep at night once aboard, instead napping during the day so that she would be awake and vigilant after dark. Little Eva later recalled how her mother's anxiety weighed on her, though her father brushed off such fears as superstition. The Harts settled into their second-class cabin, and Eva spent her days exploring the ship under the supervision of her parents. She remembered the elegance of the vessel, the grandeur of the dining rooms, and the sense of excitement among the passengers, many of whom were bound for new lives in America or Canada. On the night of April 14th, 1912, after dinner, Esther insisted on staying awake as usual. Just before midnight, the Titanic struck the iceberg. The jolt, though not violent, was noticeable enough to rouse attention. Benjamin went up to investigate and quickly returned, urging Esther and Eva to dress warmly. He wrapped Eva in a blanket and hurried his wife and daughter up to the boat deck. Eva vividly remembered the confusion, people milling about in disbelief, officers trying to maintain order, and the icy air that bit at her cheeks. Esther clutched Eva's hand tightly. Benjamin guided them toward the lifeboats, where women and children were being loaded first. As they reached one of the boats, Benjamin bent down and told his daughter to be a good girl and hold tightly to her mother. He kissed her and then kissed Esther before stepping back into the crowd. That was the last Eva ever saw of her father. Eva and her mother were placed in Lifeboat 14, one of the last to be launched under the command of 5th Officer Harold Lowe. Unlike some of the earlier lifeboats, which left the ship half empty, Lifeboat 14 was filled close to capacity. Eva later remembered the sight of the great ship breaking apart in the distance, the terrible sounds of metal tearing, and the cries of hundreds of people struggling in the freezing water. The image of those cries haunted her for decades. She said she could never sleep with the window open afterward, because the night air always seemed to carry echoes of those voices. After several harrowing hours adrift in the dark, the survivors in Lifeboat 14 were picked up by the Carpathia. Eva and her mother were taken aboard, shivering, traumatized, and grieving. When the Carpathia reached New York, they eventually returned to England instead of continuing on to Canada as planned. Esther never remarried, and she and Eva built a close life together back home, always shadowed by the memory of Benjamin's loss. As Eva grew older, she pursued a career as a singer and later worked in public service. But the Titanic never left her. For many years, she kept her memories private, partly because of the trauma, partly because people often dismissed the recollections of a child. However, in her later life, she became one of the most outspoken Titanic survivors. Eva criticized White Star Line and Captain Edward Smith for their lack of lifeboats and inadequate safety measures. She spoke publicly about the arrogance of labeling a ship unsinkable, arguing that such pride led directly to the disaster. She also condemned the practice of launching lifeboats half full, leaving countless people to die unnecessarily in the freezing Atlantic. In the decades after the sinking, Eva became a familiar figure in Titanic circles. She gave interviews, contributed to documentaries, and attended commemorative events. Her sharp memory and articulate testimony provided invaluable first-hand insight into the human side of the tragedy. Unlike some survivors who preferred silence, Eva felt it was her duty to speak for those who had no voice, her father included. She was especially passionate about memorializing the victims and ensuring that the lessons of the disaster were not forgotten. In the 1980s, when salvage operations began to recover artifacts from the wreck, Eva voiced strong opposition. She believed the Titanic should be left as a graveyard at sea. Eva would pass away on February 14, 1996, at the age of 91. To the very end, she carried the memory of that night with her, the image of her father's face as he said goodbye, the bitter cold, and the screams in the darkness. She made her trauma a lifelong mission of remembrance, using her story not only to honor the dead but also to remind the living of the dangers of human arrogance.